somebody at the EPA who actually does protect our environment, somebody who believes in climate change and takes it seriously for the benefit of all of us, including our children. So I would urge you to resign before your scandals push you out.
So you can add EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt to the list of Trump officials to be confronted in a restaurant over the last few weeks. But what's worse for Pruitt, that might not even have been the worst part of his day. Take this. The Washington Post revealed 2 of his top aides have provided fresh details to congressional investigators in recent days about some of his most controversial spending and management decisions. Here's the second paragraph of the story. Count how many ethics questions come up in a single sentence. The Trump administration appointees describe 1, an administrator who sought a salary that topped $200,000 for his wife, and 2, accepted help from a subordinate in that job search. 3, requested aid from senior EPA officials in a dispute with a Washington landlord, and 4, disregarded concerns about his first-class travel. For nearly anyone else at nearly any other time, this would be career-threatening. But for Pruitt, it's just another day at the EPA. This isn't his first time at the rodeo, or even his second or his third. In fact, over the last few months, Pruitt has faced an onslaught of negative press over actions he's taken during his political career, especially things he's done in his current post, from spending taxpayer dollars on fountain pens, wanting a soundproof phone booth, and something called tactical pants. I'm going to have to Google that myself, to having a top aide try to get a Chick-fil-A franchise for his wife. People are now shouting from the rooftops, how does this man still have a job working for a press and media-obsessed president? Bill Kristol is back with us. And Bill, I'm going to let you take the first stab at that. How is he still there?
Yeah, I don't really know, honestly. It's not as if they can't get someone else in there who has, you know, conservative views on how the EPA should go about regulating and so forth. There are plenty of people who have Pruitt's views who wouldn't have all that baggage.
Like, he could pick someone at a rally who would agree with that. I mean, like, anyone in the front row who would agree with that and not have this much baggage.
I guess I would. Yeah, no, I mean, it shows in a way, though, how once Trump decides to be stubborn, for all the media pressure and people coming up to certain restaurants and even some congressional pressure, if you control both houses of Congress, and if you don't have serious oversight from either house, because the Republicans control them both, and I've got to say, the Democrats have just done a miserable job, even though they're in the minority, of causing trouble, trying to insist on hearings, causing a ruckus when there aren't hearings, and so forth. You hear almost nothing from anyone, right? So this teacher goes up to Pruitt in a restaurant, but is any senior, maybe I missed it, but have senior Democrats in the House or Senate been at all effective in calling this and sort of making more of a fuss about this? Trump has helped a lot by the incompetence, honestly, of the Democrats.
But I mean, Bill makes a good point, but even Republicans have become critics. And this is the former acting director of the U.S. Office of Government Ethics, I think he worked for Bush and Obama, who says that Pruitt is a gift that keeps on giving in terms of examples of how senior government officials, particularly in this administration, abuse their power and their position and really treat the government's resources, of which the most valuable are personnel, as personal servants. If we were talking about any other federal employee, it would be that person's supervisor to take disciplinary action. This falls squarely on the shoulders of the president. He seems to do nothing but go out of his way to praise Scott Pruitt.
Yeah, I mean, look at this. It's a ticker tape parade of scandal.
I know. The president gets mad about something buried in the inside of the New York Times. I mean, it attacks him. And
the story that I found particularly disgusting this week is the one from Vox, where he told 2 employees to pay for his hotel and said, "I'll get you back," and then he didn't pay for it. He's like horrible bosses, Washington edition. Like, I don't understand how members of the Senate aren't like, it's not just, as Bill Kristol, it's not just you can find someone else to do this position, but Scott Pruitt is going to start showing up in campaign ads. Yeah. Scott Pruitt is going to be used against Republicans this fall. Like, there is no value that he brings to this administration that is outweighed by the scandals that he's causing. And all he does is sort of damage and bring down anything else that the Republicans are trying to do.
I also think there's a creepy factor. I'm sorry. There's nothing normal about what, if you fly out of LGA, they've got those little foam, I think they're called jabber boxes. I always see them. I'm like, somebody should just buy him one of these on eBay. I mean, there's a lack of self-sufficiency, wanting the cream. I mean, that's super weird. There is a weird factor. If the bad headlines weren't enough, and the idea that you could pick any man or woman out of any, or child, out of any Trump rally, and they could do the same job without getting all that bad press. There's a weirdo factor to this guy.
Oh, a total weirdo factor. I'm not looking for President Trump to fire him, and I'm not looking for Democrats to say anything about him, because why? let him just be crushed by the weight of his own scandal, turn him into campaign ads so they can show the culture of corruption that is the Trump administration. And you just asked a moment ago, what are tactical pants? So while you were talking to everybody else, I did a Google, went to tactical gear, and you're going to love this description.
Right.
Tactical pants guide. At a glance, tactical pants appear to be a simple cargo, yet upon closer inspection, one finds strategic placement of an array of pockets tailored for the real-life action figure.
I'm sorry. I was a little afraid when I heard weirdo come out of my mouth. I'm sticking with it. Let me ask you when ethical lapses become legal concerns.
Yeah, and so that's maybe the check, just like Mueller is doing some of the checking that congressional Republicans should be doing on the president. A prosecutor can check Pruitt. And so it's against the law to self-deal. You can't use your government job to try to get people to hook you up. So some congressmen have referred it to the IG. So the next step after an investigation would be a referral to a criminal prosecution. But Nicole, you worked in the District of Columbia. You worked for the federal government in the White House. So you know that any regular GS 8 or 9 would have been fired fast.
Richard Painter was my ethics officer. A reporter couldn't buy me a soda. I heard you, Bill Kristol, trying to get back in.
Yeah, I just think, honestly, though, people are kidding themselves, so they think Scott Pruitt's going to be in a lot of ads. I've been on some campaigns. No one's going to advise the candidate to put up 30-second ads about an EPA administrator no one's heard of. It would take 28 seconds to even explain the scandal. The Weekly Standard called for Pruitt to resign or be fired. We reiterated that call yesterday, so I am appalled by Pruitt's behavior. But the system doesn't correct itself, and this is where members of Congress have more clout. You know, even if you're in the minority, you can threaten to hold up appropriations. You can do all kinds of things that are different from us sitting around saying, boy, can you believe this headline and can you believe that headline? I think Republicans should do it. I'm embarrassed that Republicans have done so little. But honestly, there are 49 Democrats in the Senate. I mean, couldn't a couple of them make this their theme and hammer away at it? They really have been so passive on this as on other issues, I think.
And you make a good point. I mean, the political argument seems to be the only thing that holds any water with this White House. And there is a political case to be made that that Pruitt is so against brand. I mean, he's against the Trump brand in every way. He's the swampiest guy they've got. He seems like Donald Trump likes rich guys like Gary Cohn. He's always trying to scam everything. He's got his aides putting hotel rooms on their personal credit cards. I don't even know if that's legal. He's so against everything that Donald Trump ran on. I won't say believed in, because who knows what he believes in, but he's certainly against the Trump political brand. Do you think that at any point will bring him, make his job less secure, Bill?
Yeah, it's possible. Trump, does turn on people and takes his time usually, but eventually gets rid of them. So it'd be kind of amazing if John Kelly goes next month, though, and if others come and go and Pruitt's hanging in there. I mean, look, it's pretty appalling. But on the other hand, with Donald Trump as president of the United States, and look at what he does every day and what he gets away with every day and every week. And so I feel a little silly sitting here being all indignant about the EPA administrator. No, seriously, when Trump has done things that are much worse, you know?
Yeah, and you're right. H.R. McMaster couldn't stay, but Pruitt can.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.